I thought I was going to be erased after failing the mission. The next second, a system alert popped up. Mission failure penalty, zombie apocalypse mode will soon be activated. At the wedding, my fiancé let go of my hand and ran straight towards my best friend. Watching his retreating figure, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Aria's arrival at the wedding took everyone by surprise. Oscar was so stunned by her appearance that he couldn't help but walk towards her. I grabbed his sleeve. Oscar, you're my groom. What am I supposed to do if you leave now? Oscar looked at me with difficulty. Blair, you know I can't let her go. He slowly removed my fingers from his sleeve and ran towards Aria without looking back, embracing her tightly. The guests were instantly abuzz, and in this farce, I was the complete joke. A voice from the brain system chimed in. Mission to win over Oscar failed. Mission failed. I let out a long sigh of relief. Finally, I was going to be erased. To win Oscar over, I had demeaned myself to the core, so much so that in my midnight dreams I wished I could strangle him. This damned mission was finally over. Before I could comfort myself, the system spoke again. Ultimate penalty, zombie apocalypse mode will soon be activated. Then, a countdown appeared in my mind. 5, 0, 0, 0, 0, 4, 59, 59. Is this supposed to be a punishment? This feels more like a reward. I fiercely raised my head to look forward. That despicable couple was still clinging to each other. Aria held Oscar and smirked at me triumphantly. Oh, provoking me. I composed my expression and flipped her the middle finger. The surroundings fell silent for a moment. Then whispers began. Blair is losing her cool. Tisk, tisk. She's just unlucky. Aria is a rich girl who studied abroad. How can Blair, who started from scratch as a small gym owner, compete with her? Exactly, look at her robust physique covered in scars. How can she compare to the fair and beautiful Aria? She's an orphan, and it hasn't been easy for her to get where she is. The mistake was falling for Oscar. I rolled my eyes and yanked off the veil on my head. Grabbing my wedding dress, I ran outside. There was no time to waste on them any longer. It took me 10 minutes to change my clothes and run out of the hotel. I hailed a taxi and headed straight home. I asked the system, don't I have any cheats? System, no, me, system. However, the points you've earned in this world can be exchanged for items in the points shop. Suddenly, a virtual shopping interface popped up in my mind. I glanced at the balance in the top right corner, 999, that's quite a lot, but the prices on the item page started in the thousands. I was annoyed. The cheapest item was a 10 square meter portable storage space for 1,000 points. I tried to negotiate with the system. Can I buy it on credit? System, no credit, but exchanges are possible. Curious. I asked, what kind of exchanges? System, any of the 5 senses, emotions, desires, all are acceptable. Me, okay. System, no. 8. System, smiling, I said, can I exchange my precious compassion and 999 points for this storage space? System, of course. The moment I clicked to confirm the purchase, I felt slightly dizzy. When I came to, I could faintly feel a small space in the corner of my mind. I reached into my bag, grasped the car keys, and with a thought, the keys vanished from my hand, and at the same time, a key suddenly appeared out of nowhere in the space, floating up and down. 2. I ordered a bunch of stuff online for same-city delivery, making a special request for them to hurry up with the delivery. Upon returning to my residential complex, I didn't go straight home. First, I visited a nearby renovation company to have someone reinforce all the doors and windows at my place. Then I headed straight to the garage, drove out my big Jeep, and went to the nearby supermarket. At that moment, the countdown in my mind showed. For 2019, I spent half an hour in the supermarket, stocking up on a large amount of supplies. The supermarket staff delivered the items to the garage and helped load them into my car. After they left, I touched the supplies in the car, and in just a moment, they filled half of the mental space in my mind. Without delay, I drove around and raided a fruit shop, a clothing store, and a hardware store on the next street. Finally, when I passed by a sword collection museum, a Tang Dynasty sword in the display case caught my eye. Boss, how much for this Tang sword? The boss sized me up and said, this Tang sword is a fine piece and it's been sharpened. It's not for sale, just for display. Sharpened. That's just perfect. I negotiated with him. I really like it. Could you please name a price? The boss sneered and kept silent. I slapped my card on the table. 10,000. Will you sell it or not? Having struggled in Kyoto for so many years, I had managed to save up a bit. The boss's expression changed instantly. Seeing as you're interested, it would be the sword's good fortune. Tang's sword +1. I also picked out a few other styles of swords to purchase. Without exception, all were sharpened. The assortment of items filled the remaining half of the space in my mind. When I got home after my shopping spree, the countdown read 2:10:06. The items I had ordered online had also arrived. I moved them into the storage room. Then, I casually changed the password of the electronic door lock and called Oscar. I'm giving you an hour to clear out the trash you left in my house. Oscar was clearly not pleased. Blair, can't you speak nicely? Me, idiot. Oscar, me. If you're late, I'll handle it myself. I hung up the phone. The renovation company's workers had already come early to start reinforcing the doors and windows. Although it was a bit tough to ask them to get everything done in 3 hours without prior appointment, but money talks. Doubling the payment got a crowd of people eager to work. 20 minutes later, Oscar arrived. I said, hurry up and clean up this mess. It's an eyesore. Oscar's expression was grim. I owe you an apology today. But don't you think this is a bit much? I really didn't want to waste any more time talking to him. I threw his stuff right out. Ah. A woman's cry of pain came from outside. I raised an eyebrow. Oscar rushed out anxiously. Aria, what happened? I had thrown the stuff too hard, and it all hit her. They both looked up at me. Oscar indignantly said, Blair, how could you become like this? Aria feels guilty too. She came here to apologize to you, but you treated her so rudely. I raised my hand. Sorry about that. Under the angry gaze of Oscar and Aria, I slammed the door shut. Oscar rushed to try the password lock. Beep beep beep, incorrect password, beep beep beep, incorrect password. Before the workers left, I had them change the door lock to a traditional key lock, mainly to prepare for potential power outages after the apocalypse, as they left my home smiling with their hefty pay. I glanced at the countdown, 00, 30, 20, just half an hour left. I looked at the fully stocked storage room and the space, and felt a sudden surge of security. I stood on the balcony and looked up at the sky. The sunny weather from the morning was nowhere in sight. At that moment, the sun was obscured by a blanket of gray clouds. The wind rustled the trees along the roadside. People wrapped themselves up and hurried home, warning of an impending downpour. I retrieved a high-definition telescope from storage. Through it, I saw Oscar and Aria still standing in the park. Aria was crying with her head bowed. Oscar crouched in front of her, gently consoling her. I shifted my gaze elsewhere, and soon, my attention was caught by a bus at the end of the road. It was swerving erratically before it finally crashed into a parked sedan. The sudden crash startled the bystanders who quickly surrounded the scene, demanding the bus driver to come out and explain. More and more people gathered, and eventually, even the traffic police arrived. I checked the countdown timer, 00:08:11. Something about that bus felt off. The owner of the sedan, a burly man with a temper, made his way through the crowd and began pounding on the bus windows, cursing loudly. Countdown, 00:03:05. After hammering at the door for a while, he suddenly stopped. Those gathered by the door instinctively stepped back. The bus door opened. A frail man stepped out. His eyes unfocused and his face ashen. Through my telescope, I could see a web-like black pattern on his neck. He staggered towards the crowd. Countdown, 00:01:02. The sedan owner said a few words, but the man did not respond. Losing his temper, he shoved the man to the ground and started cursing loudly at him. Countdown, 00:00:25. My heart pounded with each passing second of the countdown. I kept my eyes fixed on the scene. Countdown, 00:00:02. The man on the ground convulsed and then abruptly rose in a twisted, horrifying motion. Countdown, 00:00:00. He lunged at the sedan owner who had been cursing him and bit off one of his fingers. The onlookers panicked and scattered. In agony, the sedan owner writhed on the ground. Before he could get up, the man was on him again, biting into his neck. Meanwhile, the doors of the bus stood wide open, and more people staggered out, men, women, the elderly, and children, all bearing the same black markings on their necks. As I watched, a chill ran down my spine. System, apocalypse mode has begun, please strive to survive. Within just half an hour, the whole street was in chaos. Those initially bitten developed black patterns on their necks within minutes and began biting others in a daze. The infection spread rapidly, sending people into a panicked flight toward their homes. Oscar and Aria, hearing screams, left the park only to see a crowd scrambling towards them. Confused, Oscar instinctively stopped one person. What happened? Why are you running? The person pushed past him. Monsters, monsters. Still puzzled, Aria, trembling, tugged at his arm. Look, what is that? They looked up just in time to see someone hit by an out-of-control truck and land not far from them. The person lay bloodied on the ground, their head almost severed. Logically, they should have died instantly. But what happened next froze their blood. The mangled person made a strange noise from their throat, then suddenly jerked upright, their head still hanging from their neck. Aria screamed, hiding behind Oscar. Her scream caught the creature's attention. It slowly turned their way, then, with limbs contorted, charged at them. Oscar quickly grabbed Aria's hand and they ran towards the residential area, watching their figures sprinting towards me. I frowned. Oh no. The chaos in the apartment building started shortly after. Some residents ran back to take refuge, and some outsiders followed them in. But what made things worse was that zombies were following them. I hid behind the door with a katana, looking through the peephole. 10 minutes later, sure enough, Oscar and Aria's big faces appeared at the door. Blair, open the door quickly. Blair, there are monsters outside. Let us in first. I knew exactly what they were like. How could I possibly let the wolf into the house? Seeing that I remained silent and did not open the door, Oscar got anxious and started banging on the door forcefully. My newly reinforced door was quite sturdy and didn't budge. Aria was both shocked and scared. Oscar, I think I heard the monsters scream. They're coming up. During this exchange, the man living opposite me also ran back from outside. He took out his keys, his hands trembling several times before he managed to open the door. Just as he pushed the door open, a strange man and woman squeezed in with him. He frowned but didn't have time to say much and hurriedly closed the door. Through the peephole, I saw Oscar and Aria enter the opposite apartment. Almost the moment they closed the door, 3 to 5 zombies surged up at the stairwell entrance. They roared and rushed a few steps in this direction, but then, not finding any living people, their movements gradually slowed down, and they began to wander aimlessly in the corridor. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned back to the balcony. In just that short time, there were almost no signs of living people on the streets anymore. I took out my phone and checked it. The news online was growing wildly. Monsters like these were appearing not just on my street but everywhere. They bite on sight, don't feel pain, and those bitten by them turn into the same kind of monsters within 3 minutes. This disaster was spreading at an unimaginable speed. This is the end of the world. This is the end of the world. What should I do? My mother is still outside. Where on earth did these damn monsters come from? Where are the police? The military? Isn't anyone in charge? Help, we're trapped in the office and can't get out. Is there anyone who can save us? I slowly closed my phone. Any slight hope and secret pleasure I had were gone at this moment. I looked at the chaotic world and, unusually, felt a bit lost. That evening, the citywide broadcast started. Currently, a wide-ranging outbreak of an unknown virus has occurred in many places. Please do not go out, it said. Experts are conducting in-depth research on the virus and believe that a solution will be found soon. Let us trust the authorities. Most households have some food stored, so surviving 3 or 4 days wouldn't be a problem. But 3 days passed, and the spread of the virus was not slowing down but intensifying. Every night, the sound of zombies walking around in the corridors could be heard, occasionally emitting a few spine-chilling roars. Under such conditions, people could hardly sleep. With food becoming scarcer, people gradually fell into deeper panic. Finally, someone couldn't bear it anymore and opened the main door. I'm going to fight it out with you. As you can imagine, he quickly became a new member of the zombie horde. Some people in despair turned savage, like my neighbor across the hall. On the fourth night, I heard a woman's scream coming from across the hall. It was Arya's voice. "What are you doing? Let go of me." Following that was a male voice. "My neighbor Gavin, damn it, you've been freeloading off me for so many days. Letting me have a good time isn't too much to ask, right?" Oscar was both shocked and angry. "We gave you money, don't touch her." Gavin spat. "What's the use of money now, bro? Your girlfriend is so pretty, it's a bit unfair for you to enjoy her all by yourself." Listening from across the hall, my scalp tingled. Normally, Gavin and I just greeted each other when we saw each other. He seemed polite. I never thought he was this kind of person. The cursing from across the hall continued for a long time. The zombies in the corridor were all attracted over. "I know where there's food." Arya's voice was sharp and piercing, sounding somewhat shrill. A bad premonition suddenly rose in my heart. Sure enough, the next second, your neighbor Blair, she likes to stock up, and on the day of the incident, she went to the supermarket and bought a lot of supplies. My friend saw her at the supermarket and even took a photo for me. "I showed you, she really does have a lot of supplies," I said. Gavin looked skeptical. "Really? That woman has hidden so much good stuff." I just sighed. Damn it. 5. Suddenly, it became quiet on the other side. I paced back and forth, anxious. I should never have called Oscar and Arya here. Now, I've just made trouble for myself. What should I do? Given the situation, Gavin would surely consider Arya's suggestion. They might decide in less than half an hour how to fight over the supplies in my house. I need to take the initiative. As time ticked by, I looked at the tang knife in my hand and finally made up my mind. In this apocalyptic world, only the strong have the right to speak. After the silence, zombies began wandering around again. I put on a thick jacket, gloves, and used tape to tightly cover any exposed skin. Listening to the faint footsteps outside the door, I took a few deep breaths. When the footsteps faded a bit, I quietly unlocked the door. The corridor lights flickered on and off, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Without any hesitation, I charged forward and chopped off the head of a zombie lagging behind with my tang knife. For these pain-insensitive, undead monsters, only destroying their brains could put them down for good. The head rolled on the ground. The 3 zombies ahead heard the noise and immediately turned and lunged at me. I dodged a zombie's embrace and stabbed another in the eye with my tang knife. That zombie instantly stopped moving and collapsed. I rolled on the ground to avoid the last zombie's attack and rushed to the end of the corridor, slamming the half-open iron gate of the stairwell shut. This way, the zombies from other floors couldn't get through. All I needed to do now was to eliminate the remaining 2 zombies to secure the whole floor. I gripped my tang knife, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. Oddly exhilarated, I knew behind the doors along the corridor, many eyes were silently watching me. It didn't matter. If they saw me, then I had achieved my goal. The last 2 zombies weren't hard to deal with. I pinned the final zombie against the door of the apartment opposite me, then pulled out my tang knife and chopped off its head. The blade was covered in zombie blood and flesh, and I stood there, catching my breath. It was extremely quiet around, with only the sound of zombies banging on the stairwell door. 2 minutes later, a door cautiously opened. A haggard-looking woman peered out. She was startled by the mess. "You killed them all." People began to cautiously step out of their apartments. Gavin was the last to come out. I wiped the blood off my face and looked him in the eye. Gavin quickly averted his gaze, his eyes filled with horror. I glanced at Oscar and Arya standing behind him. They looked at me as if they had seen a ghost. "Little girl, you've been killing people," Mrs. Moore exclaimed, slapping her thigh. I couldn't help but laugh. "People, do you think they're still human?" Everyone fell silent. I flicked the bits of flesh off my tang knife. They stepped aside. I smiled. "I've cleared the monsters for you. A little compensation isn't too much to ask, right?" I collected 1,000 from each family, but when I came to Gavin's, I changed my tune. "Not from your family, you need to provide food." 6. Gavin's face twisted with anger as he asked me, "Why?" I casually cleaned my ears. "Because I'm hungry, and there's no food left at home." Gavin glared fiercely at Arya and Oscar, then looked warily at the knife in my hand. He fetched 2 bags of instant noodles from the kitchen, and I, not being picky, took them and said, "Thanks." I went back home, I locked the door and headed straight for the bathroom, where I threw up until I was dizzy and disoriented. It was disgusting. My hand is still shaking from holding onto the toilet. Although I'm pretty strong and have even helped the police catch criminals before, I've never chopped off someone's head. The impact was too much, and I needed time to recover. After emptying my stomach, I felt much better, sitting on the cold floor. I began to think about what to do next while checking the items in my storage space. During the process, I accidentally clicked on the virtual shopping interface. Just as I was about to close it, I paused. The credit balance in the top right corner had changed. I had spent all my points to exchange for this space, but now it showed a balance of 40 points. An absurd thought crossed my mind. I asked the system, did I earn these points by killing those 4 zombies just now? System, congratulations. Host, on achieving the small tryout milestone, you've earned 10 points for each of the 4. Suppressing the excitement in my heart, I asked, if I kill more zombies in the future, will I continue to earn points? System, yes, you can. I was a bit dazed, and it took me a while to regain my composure. I felt like I knew what I needed to do next. That same evening after I killed the zombies, Oscar and Arya were kicked out by Gavin. The zombies' corpses in the hallway were particularly frightening. And Arya stood there crying for a long time. Oscar was extremely patient in comforting her. You could say they really seemed like a pair of star-crossed lovers. Finally, a Mrs. Moore, unable to bear it any longer, took them in. On the 7th day of the apocalypse, the water supply was cut off. The number of zombies on the streets was increasing. I sat on the balcony, as usual, looking through my binoculars. Soon, my gaze fixed on a zombie in a police uniform. I was interested in the gun holstered at his waist. Buzz, buzz, my phone vibrated violently twice. Electricity and internet were still functioning, but I estimated that they wouldn't last much longer. In the owner's group chat of Building 18, someone tagged everyone. Brothers and sisters, most residents are running low on food. To survive, we're organizing a team to look for supplies in the neighborhood supermarket. Those willing to join us, please send one and tag everyone. The message was sent by Tyler, a fitness coach who lived on the 8th floor. Although he didn't work at my gym, we were quite familiar with each other. The message had been out for a while with no responses. Looking at the police zombie wandering below, I typed a 1 on my phone screen. Seeing someone take the lead, others gradually joined in. By 7 o'clock that evening, 10 people had signed up. Tyler added us 10 to a new group chat. He went through tomorrow's plan in detail with us. Since most floors weren't cleared of zombies, the elevator was out of the question. He planned to lead us out through the windows, then into the residential garage to drive to the supermarket. The plan was standard, and I had no objections. Tyler typed a few more lines. Tomorrow we might need someone to drive another car to lure the zombies away from the supermarket. Any volunteers? We'll signal when we're done, and we'll cover you when you return. No one responded for a long time. It was clear to anyone that this task was the most dangerous. One wrong move could mean not coming back, but I felt this task was quite suitable for me. After all, I needed to go outside to get a gun, and moving in a group would be inconvenient. Thinking this, I didn't hesitate and typed another 1 in the chat. After sending it, the chat went silent for a moment. Tyler, Blair, you are a woman comrade. Would you really take on this task? Tasks like these are better left to the men, said Tyler. Do you look down on women? I asked. That's not what I meant, Tyler replied. That settles it then. No more dithering, I declared. The next morning, we climbed down from the balcony because the security bars made it not too difficult. We reached the agreed spot, and Tyler led us along the wall to the entrance of the underground parking lot. There weren't many zombies wandering in the parking lot, and Tyler and a few others quickly dealt with them. I drove my large Jeep at the front. The community supermarket was located outside the residential area. As I drove out, a few zombies sporadically followed. I parked the car right in front of the supermarket. Without stopping, I floored the accelerator and smashed through the glass doors. The dozen or so zombies inside, hearing the noise, all rushed towards us. I skillfully reversed the car and sped away. The zombies from the streets around the supermarket rushed out in a frenzy. After all the zombies from the supermarket were lured out, Tyler parked his large SUV sideways, blocking the supermarket entrance. They got out on one side and safely entered the supermarket. I found the zombie in a police uniform at the entrance of a pharmacy. The zombies behind had already been shaken off. I parked at the pharmacy entrance. I got out of the car, pushed the door open, and walked in. 3 zombies inside roared and charged at me simultaneously. I raised my hand, and a tang sword instantly appeared in my grasp. Without hesitation, I swung my sword to chop them down. It might have been my imagination, but it felt like my physical strength had significantly increased. After obtaining the handgun, I threw it into my portable space. Before more zombies could gather, I drove back to the residential area from another direction. The car at the supermarket entrance was gone. I caught a glimpse of the mess inside. Many items had been taken. Not looking further, I drove directly into the residential area. Just as I drove in, the main gate was closed. I hit the brakes and turned to look. Tyler was instructing others to quickly lock the gate. He walked over to me. "How are you? Not hurt, right?" I shook my head and raised an eyebrow at him. "Plan on clearing all the zombies in the area too?" Tyler smiled. "Smart. Aside from those locked in the residential buildings, there weren't many zombies wandering in the area." While we were talking, a group of zombies emerged from behind the residential buildings and swiftly ran towards us. Some in the group, who had never killed zombies before, unconsciously stepped back. Tyler, with a grim expression, held a watermelon knife in his hand. "Step aside," I whispered. Tyler, puzzled, stepped aside. I floored the accelerator, and the car shot forward, charging directly into the group of zombies. The leading 7 or 8 zombies were knocked flying, limbs scattering. They hadn't completely died as they fell to the ground. Those with quicker reflexes had already moved forward to finish them off. Some zombies that weren't hit became enraged and surrounded me. I pushed open the car door, blocked a zombie, and then, holding the tang sword, joined the fight. By noon, all the wandering zombies in the residential area had been thoroughly cleared. Out of the 10-person squad, only 7 remained. Tyler sat down on the ground, somewhat drained. I walked up to him and handed him a bottle of water. Tyler looked up at me, his expression complex. "Thanks." We rested there for a while, just about to check the supplies in the car when we heard rustling noises from the dormitory buildings on both sides. Many people opened their windows and looked out. "Mrs. Moore from the 4th floor of Building 18 shouted, 'Don't go back on your word about sharing with us.'" Tyler frowned, clearly a bit annoyed. "I've said I'll share, and I will," he stated firmly. As soon as he finished speaking, some residents had already opened their security windows and climbed down. They rushed towards the small truck loaded with supplies and began looting despite Tyler and his group's attempts to stop them. Residents from other buildings could no longer hold themselves back. They climbed down from their balconies, joining the frenzied mob scrambling for supplies. Tyler and his friends were pushed to the outskirts of the crowd. Someone couldn't hold back their anger and cursed loudly. "Damn it, do you have no shame? We risked our lives to find these supplies. Stop stealing." But in such chaos, no one listened, and no one could be stopped. It was as if they were possessed. Frantically looting everything, Tyler and his group trembled with rage. I watched for a while, then climbed into my Jeep. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A sudden burst of engine noise filled the air. The looters paused their frantic grabbing. They turned their heads in terror and dispersed in an instant. "What are you trying to do?" I stuck my head out the window and smiled at them. "I just didn't get enough fun ramming zombies earlier, and now, I see a bunch of beasts that aren't human." The subtext was clear. "Anyone who moves, I'll run over you." They looked at each other, not daring to move again. After a few more minutes of consideration, they quickly dispersed, clutching the supplies they had managed to grab. The pickup truck was almost empty, with noodles torn open and scattered on the ground. It was a disheartening sight. Tyler silently distributed the remaining supplies among his friends. Then he brought a portion to my car. "Blair, this is yours." I looked at the 5 bags of instant noodles, a loaf of bread, and 3 bottles of milk he offered, but didn't take them. Tyler looked at me, and I gestured for him to unload the stuff from my trunk. It was several boxes of self-heating hot pots and cases of cookies and mineral water. Tyler looked at me in shock. "You," I casually said. "I came across a convenience store on the way back and grabbed some stuff." I indeed stumbled upon the store and luckily found its warehouse. Most of the supplies had been stowed in my storage space, and what I brought out was just a fraction of it. The boys gathered around, excited yet uneasy. They had bravely followed Tyler out, risking danger because their homes were nearly at their breaking point. You guys split it. As soon as I said this, they looked at each other, hesitant to move. This doesn't seem right. Tyler's face turned red. We already put you at risk by making you lure the zombies. We can't take the supplies you worked hard to find. I scoffed and motioned for them to look up, behind the anti-theft bars, through the curtains. Many eyes were watching us. I don't think I can bring all these supplies home intact. Rather than letting them benefit, you guys should take it. I tapped on the supplies. There's not much. Hurry up and divide it. They looked at each other again, and this time, without hesitation, they opened the boxes and started distributing the supplies. Blair, thank you. If you ever need help in the future, just ask. I nodded slightly, took my share, and drove away. 10. Tyler and I organized several more teams to go out and search for supplies. Sometimes we searched unoccupied homes, sometimes places outside the community, but these times, we didn't share with those who only wanted to reap the benefits without contributing. Some didn't believe it and even tried to steal. Tyler cut off his arm with a single strike. His entire demeanor was murderous. Who dares to move? Now, if the residents in the community want supplies, they must join us in taking risks, or they have to figure it out themselves. But with so many survivors, there are always those with ulterior motives. On the 25th day of the apocalypse, I saw someone break into the apartment across from mine. They beat people, stole things, and dragged the young and beautiful woman of the house into a room. The precarious order was shattered, and the darker side of human nature was fully unleashed. Now, what's scarier than the zombies? Humanity itself is the source of these troubles. Due to their wariness of Tyler and me, our building had remained relatively peaceful until now. However, those people knew that our building probably had the richest supplies. On the 30th day of this apocalypse, their greed overcame their fear. They snuck into our building under the cover of night. I hadn't been sleeping. Instead, I sat on the living room sofa, listening to the noises outside. They crept up, floor by floor. Soon, I heard noises coming from next door. They were frantically smashing the door, and someone loudly said, "Boss, I saw last time. There's a woman here who is stunning. Her man just went out with Tyler yesterday. There should be plenty of supplies at home." They were talking about Oscar and Aria. Oscar did indeed go out with Tyler a few times, mostly driving, and then sharing some supplies to barely meet daily needs. It was just that Aria's beauty was too striking. A few days ago, she mentioned wanting to exercise, which was fine, but for some reason, maybe she wasn't thinking straight. She wore a tight outfit and did aerobics on the balcony. I watched and felt like giving her a thumbs up. She was truly an oddball. If trouble didn't find her, it would be a disservice to her efforts. The door next door didn't stand a chance against their relentless bashing and soon gave way. They kicked in the door and barged in. Aria screamed, and Oscar cursed, telling them to get out. The noise next door was so loud that the whole building could hear it, but no one came out to interfere. In these times, just keeping oneself safe was already difficult. Aria, crying, rushed out from next door, and the group of men leisurely followed her as if playing cat and mouse. Aria pounded on the doors of neighbors on the same floor, pleading, "Help, please let me in." She knocked on several doors, but no one opened. Finally, she knocked on my door. "Blair, help me, I'm sorry, please help me." Her words were disjointed, and she was on the verge of breaking down. Oscar, covered in blood, stumbled out too. He stood in front of Aria, barely able to keep himself upright. Seeing them in such a pitiful state, I should have felt satisfied, yet, for some reason, I felt nothing inside. Aria leaned against my door, holding a kitchen knife. "Don't come any closer." The men paused for a moment, then burst into laughter. "Look, she's got a knife. Sweetheart, ever killed a chicken before?" "Never killed a chicken, and you think you can kill a person?" The burly leader reached out and snatched the knife from her hand. Then he reached out to grab her. That's when I opened the door. Aria fell into the room, looking up at me in surprise. "Blair." The men looked at me, their faces filled with apprehension. The leader smiled. "Blair, we know you're tough. We won't enter your place. but leave this woman out of it. Hearing this, Arya clung to my legs. Blair, please save me. I took a deep breath and looked at the group sternly. Get lost. If you know I'm tough, then you should know you have no business on this floor. It wasn't out of a sense of heroism that I decided to help Arya. After all, any sense of compassion had long been erased by the system. I simply thought that in an apocalypse, love and affection were trivial and worthless. Besides, if these people had the audacity to cause trouble next door today, who's to say they wouldn't target my supplies tomorrow? The leader's face changed instantly at my words. Blair, don't push your luck. 11. No one saw who made the first move. By the time everyone reacted, we were already fighting. The more zombies I killed during this period, the stronger my physical abilities became. I knocked them down one by one, but accidentally got kicked by the leader, losing the Tang sword from my hand. Staggering to his feet, he taunted, "You're only tough because of that knife. Let's see how tough you are without it." With that, he charged at me with a kitchen knife. I remained calm, ducked under his erratic attack, and kicked him in the leg. The man fell to his knees, too pained to speak. I pulled out a gun from behind my waist. I pressed it directly against the man's head. "You lost." The man froze, dropping the kitchen knife. "Blair, let's talk. Just put the gun down first." I didn't respond, nor did I move. Sweat broke out on the man's forehead as he looked up at me, pleading, yet a vicious flash crossed his eyes. He suddenly attempted to grab the gun from my hand. I dodged his grasp, and he picked up the knife from the ground and stabbed it towards my waist. I kicked the knife away and emotionlessly pulled the trigger aimed at his head. A deafening gunshot echoed. The man fell motionless, collapsing to the ground. Blood splattered all over me, followed by Arya's heart-wrenching scream, "Ah!" On the 30th day of the apocalypse, I had killed 45 zombies and one living person. It's not that I felt numb, but something inside me had changed. Congratulations, host, for achieving the new milestone. Heart of Stone, reward, 100 points. I blinked, and when I finally processed the message from the system in my mind, I couldn't help but laugh. System, so this is the real punishment. From the initial point exchanges to now rewarding killing, you've led me step by step to discard my humanity and become a killing machine. What exactly do you want? The system's voice, mechanical and cold, sounded particularly eerie in the night. Host, your question is beyond my capacity to answer. I scoffed, didn't speak further, and got up to wash off the dirt from my body with cold water. Lying in bed, both physical and mental exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I could no longer hold on, closing my eyes and falling into darkness. I don't know how long I slept in a daze. All I knew was that I was awakened by a jarring knock on the door. Zombies in the hallway. I abruptly sat up, my head instantly cleared. I grabbed the Tang sword beside my bed and approached the door, peering through the peephole only to find a group of people outside, not zombies, but living people. The sharp-faced Mrs. Moore, along with others, relentlessly banged on my door. Tyler was there too, standing right at my doorstep. "What exactly do you want?" Mrs. Moore shouted. "Everyone saw her kill my son last night, a living, breathing person. My son went out to find food last night and never came back. I need the murderer to pay for her crime." Mrs. Moore was both crying and cursing, visibly agitated. Others chimed in, "Yeah, she kills without blinking an eye, and she has a gun. She must be an antisocial element." Tyler didn't even get a chance to speak before being labeled an accomplice, becoming immediately both anxious and angry. "Watch your words. She led us to find supplies and kill zombies. Without her, would you still be alive and well? Have some conscience." The crowd fell silent for a moment. Someone whispered, "Come on, we found the supplies ourselves. What does she have to do with it?" Tyler was almost amused by the absurdity. "When have we not been at the forefront clearing zombies during supply runs? You just follow behind and fill your bags, thinking you're something special." He stopped talking and hung his head low. I pulled the door open and leaned against the doorframe, watching them. They stepped back subconsciously upon seeing the Tang knife in my hands. Mrs. Moore glared at me fiercely. "It was you who killed my son." It was only when I got closer that I recognized her. Wasn't Mrs. Moore the leader of the first raid for supplies? Like they say, birds of a feather flock together. I looked up at her. "Yes, I killed your son. What are you going to do about it?" She probably didn't expect me to admit it so boldly, and for a moment, she was at a loss for words. I continued, want to avenge him, come on then, kill me if you can. Provoked by my words, Mrs. Moore rushed forward and slapped me. Tyler didn't manage to stop her, and he looked at me, somewhat taken aback. Blair, my head turned slightly from the impact, and I tasted a hint of blood in my mouth. Mrs. Moore had quite a slap. I touched my cheek, turning my face back to her. Are you done? Now it's my turn. The next second, I held the tang knife to her throat. The sharp blade immediately drew a line of blood across her neck. How about I reunite you with your son? Tyler grabbed my wrist. Blair, calm down. Mrs. Moore, terrified, turned pale and froze on the spot. Everyone around inhaled sharply, too afraid to make a sound. Seeing Tyler holding me back, Mrs. Moore screamed and quickly backed away, then ran off without looking back. The onlookers dispersed just as quickly. I lowered the tang knife and gestured dismissively at their retreating figures. These are the people we're risking our lives to protect. Is it worth it? Tyler remained silent. I walked into the house, signaling him to follow. I'm leaving first thing tomorrow morning. Tyler was stunned. Where to? I walked to the balcony and yanked the curtains open, looking out into the pitch-black night. My thoughts clearer than they had ever been. I'm going to create my own utopia. Day 31 of the apocalypse, 5:00 a.m. The sky was just beginning to lighten as I drove my Jeep away from the Sunnyvale complex, heading south. Tyler didn't come with me, he decided to stay. I filled my portable space completely and left the remaining supplies in the storage room for him, stopping occasionally along the way. With my current skills, as long as I avoided a horde of zombies, I was likely safe. On my way south, I encountered a group of zombies in military uniforms. Naturally, I replenished my arsenal and then switched to a military armored vehicle. Sitting in the vehicle, I was checking the equipment when a chilling sensation suddenly overwhelmed me. I leaned sideways just as a gunshot rang out from a rooftop. The bullet pierced the head of a zombie sneaking up behind me. Breathing a sigh of relief, I looked up to see a man in military uniform standing with a sniper rifle, looking down at me. That's my vehicle, he said. Day 53 of the apocalypse, I met someone. He was a soldier, the sole survivor of a rescue army. His name was Jackson, and now, he was my teammate. Don't go south anymore, he said, biting into a piece of bread, his deep gaze fixed ahead. The South has completely fallen. I asked him, then where to? Jackson replied, let's head north. I heard they've set up a temporary base there. I nodded, then north it is. Jackson looked at me, you trust me that quickly? I pointed at his uniform. I trust this uniform of yours. Jackson was momentarily stunned, then couldn't help but chuckle softly. Honestly, he was a pretty good teammate, skilled and strong, with impressive sniping abilities. Most importantly, like me, he was self-centered. Ever since we teamed up, all our missions were carried out with our own safety as the priority, although there were times when he would leave me behind, or I would betray him, but we were both lucky, always managing to escape danger. After reuniting, we'd have a fight. But by the next morning, we would hit the road together as if nothing had happened. Most of the time, Jackson and I got along quite well. For instance, at this moment, our military armored vehicle was abruptly intercepted by a group. Looking ahead at the temporary base that used to be a large factory, I turned to Jackson and asked, "This is the temporary base you mentioned?" Jackson shrugged. "It should be." I took a good look and commented, "Looks pretty good." Jackson nodded, "Indeed, but there's one issue." I turned to him. He tugged at the corner of his mouth. "It seems like the people here aren't exactly welcoming." As he spoke, we were dragged out of the vehicle. Two fierce-looking masked men pushed us into the base. They said they were taking us to meet the leader here. Walking deep into the base, we stopped outside a luxurious office. A man frisked Jackson, then removed a dagger tucked at his waist. Another man gave me a menacing look and took a few steps towards me. My expression darkened. "Hey," Jackson intervened, "you can be rough with me, but this is a lady, and," Jackson tilted his chin towards me, "this lady has a bit of a temper." After a few seconds of eye contact, the man frowned and halted. He summoned a woman to search me, after confirming we weren't a threat. They pushed us into the office. In the middle of the office was a luxurious red sofa. A man sprawled casually on it, a cigar pinched between his fingers, flanked by two military-dressed guards. He glanced at us and smiled. "Welcome to Dawn Base." He stood and approached us. "You can stay here for now. Take your time to think about your next move, before the apocalypse." I was Major General Kai of the 141 Military District in Kyoto. "Now, I'm the leader of this base. You can trust me. This place offers you shelter." Seeing that we remained silent, he didn't mind and had someone pour us 2 glasses of water. "It's been a long journey, you must be tired. Have some water to refresh yourselves." Holding the glass, I turned to Jackson. "Do you believe what he's saying?" Jackson pondered for a few seconds and admitted, "I don't." I replied, "Funny, neither do I, Kai." I turned to Kai, who was visibly confused, smiled, and then threw the water in his face. The 2 guards immediately raised their guns. Jackson stepped forward, flipped over the sofa, and kicked the gun out of one guard's hand. I magically produced a gun from thin air, knocked down Kai trying to flee to the door, and pressed the gun against his forehead. "Move again, and I'll shoot you." Sweat beaded on Kai's forehead as he hadn't anticipated this turn of events. After Jackson knocked out the 2 guards, he came over. He patted Kai on the head. "You, of all people, why impersonate Kai?" I was taken aback. "Is Kai famous?" Jackson replied, "Not really. Kai is my cousin." Me, the fake Kai, also fell silent. I tapped his head. "Speak up. Who are you really?" "The man's name is Leo, who used to work at this chemical plant. After the outbreak of the zombie virus, the owner of the chemical plant fled. Leo, who was quite bold, took the initiative to lead the people to clear out all the zombies in the plant. They then hunkered down in the plant for over half a month, surviving on the inventory of supplies they had. Eventually, supplies ran low, and Leo led the group into the city to scavenge for food. During their search, they unexpectedly encountered a squad of soldiers who had been killed by zombies. Leo devised a dubious plan. He stripped the soldiers of their uniforms, confiscated their weapons, and claimed them as his own. Then, he disguised his own group as soldiers to gain the trust of passers-by and took the opportunity to rob them of their supplies. In some ways, Leo was quite a talent. Now he was trembling. "Folks, what exactly are you planning to do?" Jackson shrugged. "Ask her." I smiled lightly. "Nothing much." Leo sighed in relief. "That's good." Me, "It's just that your base here looks pretty solid. How about you hand it over to me?" "What?" He looked at me in horror. "You're robbing me." I nodded. "Yeah, did you just figure that out?" On the 84th day of the apocalypse, Jackson and I settled in a chemical plant on the northern outskirts. We transformed it into a new, genuine base. I even took on a new subordinate named Leo. He was somewhat clever and strategic, and easy to control. Jackson, who was rather indifferent about leading, preferred to lead the team out to gather supplies, which he found endlessly enjoyable. I once asked him, "Your cousin died. Aren't you sad?" Jackson forced a smile. "Did I ever say we were close?" Me, "Well, in some ways. He and I were quite alike." By the 98th day of the apocalypse, the base was running smoothly. I had the perimeter wall expanded threefold. We built several temporary houses and developed a few vegetable gardens. Jackson found a rich variety of supplies and seeds outside. More and more people came to join us. On the 136th day of the apocalypse, several violent brawls broke out at the base. Someone dissatisfied with the distribution of supplies killed a guard. Jackson's method of dealing with the situation was simple and brutal. He broke the man's arm and threw him out of the base. His method of using violence to control violence proved quite effective, and the base remained stable for a long time. But I learned to combine kindness with severity. If Jackson wanted to play the good cop, so be it. I was ready to play the bad cop. Those who performed well in the base were rewarded accordingly, sometimes with supplies, sometimes with housing. It was very fair. Over time, the people at the base began to recognize that the real power lay with Jackson, simply because he was strong, had high combat skills, and was the toughest. As for me, I was just seen as his secretary. On the 159th day of the apocalypse, Jackson took a large group of his trusted followers to a neighboring city to look for supplies. That very night, some people with ill intentions sneaked into the supply depot. They tied up the guards and broke into the supply depot. Damn. I've always disliked that Jackson. Yeah, I accidentally took an extra pack of cigarettes while scavenging a while back, and he cursed me out. Let's grab more supplies today and leave under the cover of darkness. No need to stay here and take this humiliation. Some were still hesitant, but Blair is still at the base. She's nothing without Jackson backing her up. What power would she have? Laughing derisively, one of them said. She's just a woman, that's all the skill she has to serve men. I was very annoyed by that remark, extremely annoyed. I shone my flashlight in that person's face, causing him to squint abruptly. Who's there? I leaped down from the top, holding a katana. I stood before them. To be honest, it's been a long time since I've killed anyone. 16. I still didn't kill them. Ever since I started to deliberately avoid being manipulated by the system, I basically stopped killing. I also stopped using points from the system to exchange for items, as that would only increase my greed. Once the desire for more sets in, I might resort to any means necessary to gain points. Killing might just be the beginning. I broke their legs and threw them into a basement at the base. On day 200 of the apocalypse, Jackson returned with a large supply of goods. He went to the basement to check on them and couldn't help but click his tongue. Why did you guys have to provoke her? Didn't I tell you? That woman has a bad temper. The pitiful few exchanged glances and shook their heads, almost in tears. Jackson was taken aback. That was my oversight. Sorry. Are you going out again? If you do, you'd better stay honest. Or if Blair gets angry and decides to kill, I won't be able to stop her. You really can't mess with the King of Hell. Tears streaming down their faces, they nodded in agreement. It was much later that I learned who had started calling me the King of Hell. At the end of the first year of the apocalypse, we celebrated our first spring festival at the base. Jackson somehow found 2 large red lanterns and hung them from the ceiling of the hall. He lit 2 candles, creating quite an atmosphere. Though the dinner table lacked exotic delicacies, there was plenty of fish and meat. The pollution-free vegetables from the base's garden were just enough for us to be self-sufficient. Everything seemed to be moving in a positive direction. Leo, holding his glass, frequently toasted to me, crying and drinking. Towards the end, he could hardly speak clearly. He just shouted hoarsely, "Blair, you are my god, you are my god." I felt embarrassed and quickly waved my hand. Take him away. He's making a scene. People laughed and carried Leo away. Looking at the joyous crowd beneath the table, I couldn't help but smile. Jackson raised his glass to me. Here's to Blair. I glared at him, but still extended my glass. Since the apocalypse began, I've been on edge for far too long. Now, at last, I could relax for a bit. Blair, Jackson, there's a car coming from 3 kilometers south. Someone rushed in from outside. Me. Jackson glanced at me. Go ahead and curse if you want. I stood on the high wall with binoculars looking in that direction. An SUV was driving towards us, followed by a bus. I blinked, surprised by the odd combination. A group of zombies trailed behind them. Someone called out to me, "Blair, should we open the gate?" No rush. I lifted the binoculars again. Let's wait and see. The vehicle approached closer to our base, until it was about 400 meters away. Jackson fired a sniper rifle as a warning. The SUV stopped, and the driver got out, waving his hands vigorously towards us, in the dim moonlight. I recognized his face. 17. I never thought I'd see Tyler again under these circumstances. Seeing my nod, the people below opened the base gates. Tyler was relieved, seemingly surprised that he was allowed to enter so smoothly. He led the bus into the base. The gates closed, keeping the zombies and their terrifying howls outside. Tyler got off the bus, his legs weak. He didn't care about anything else and quickly thanked those who opened the gate. That person pointed towards me. Our boss let you in. Tyler followed his pointing hand and looked up at me standing on the high wall. When our eyes met, Tyler froze, as if he couldn't quite believe it was me. I gave him a smile. Long time no see. Welcome to my utopia. Tyler didn't speak for a long time, but then someone else got out of the passenger side of the off-road vehicle. A woman. She looked up at me, her tone filled with astonishment. Blair. Seeing Arya, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Honestly, I thought she was long dead. But apparently, she's been quite lucky. I jumped down from 10 meters high, landing steadily in front of them. It was only up close that I noticed Arya's face was disfigured. A long scar ran across the left side of her face, clinging like a centipede. Noticing my gaze, Arya didn't shy away. She gave me a bitter smile. Pretty ugly, huh? I nodded, a bit. The conversation dragged on, but Arya didn't seem to mind. Then the doors of the bus behind us opened, and the people inside came down looking somewhat panicked, men and women, young and old. They seemed weak but not seriously injured. They looked around and then noticed the food on the lobby table. Before Tyler could stop them, they rushed over and began to eat voraciously. Tyler's face turned red instantly. Our food ran out 3 days ago, and we've had a lot of troubles coming from the south. Everyone is starving now. I turned my face back emotionlessly to Tyler and Arya. Aren't you hungry? Tyler paused. I gestured towards the food. Go eat first, have a good rest tonight, and come find me in the morning, then, we'll have a good talk. 18. From Tyler's description, I roughly understood how they had survived the past year. The large group had dwindled to just over 20 people, but Tyler had done his best. I asked him, what are your plans? Continue heading north, or stay here? Tyler seemed a bit distracted, embarrassedly lowering his head. With so many of us, I laughed. Did you think we'd let you freeload? Here, you follow my rules, work for what you get, no exceptions. Hearing this, Tyler visibly relaxed. He stood up somewhat awkwardly. Of course, I'll go discuss it with everyone first. I nodded. After Tyler left, the large room was left with just me and Arya. She sat there quietly, not speaking. I broke the silence. How did Oscar die? Arya paused, her expression momentarily sorrowful before quickly returning to normal. 6 months ago. We went out with Tyler to find supplies. Oscar was bitten by a zombie while saving me. I killed him myself. I then pointed to her face. And what happened here? Arya touched her face. Without Oscar's protection, my face would have caused me trouble. To prevent future problems, I disfigured it myself. I looked at her somewhat surprised. You're quite harsh on yourself. Arya just smiled and said no more. In a year, she had changed a lot. She had become more profound and reserved. Previously, her little thoughts were almost written on her face, but now, I can't quite see through what she's thinking anymore. Arya looked at me, slightly lost in thought. She caught me off guard with a question. Blair, have you ever thought that our world is somewhat abnormal? I was taken aback, raising my head to look at her, tentatively asking, what do you mean? Arya frowned. It's hard to explain. I was raised in luxury by my parents, receiving the highest education. Breaking up with Oscar and going abroad to study was a decision I never regretted, but isn't it strange? She looked at me. Such a proud person like me returned to the country on the day Oscar got married and even ruined your wedding. I often wonder, why did I come back? I suppressed the shock in my heart. Have you figured it out? Arya lowered her eyes and shook her head. No. It's like a train that was running normally and suddenly got its direction forcibly changed by an invisible hand. I feel panic about this unknown. After Arya left, I leaned back on the sofa. System, I hadn't called it for a long time. Is this what you call a character awakening to self-awareness? Are you going to take some special measures to forcibly erase it again? The system's voice was as annoying as ever. Host, your question exceeds my authority to answer. I smirked and said no more. On the 403rd day of the apocalypse, a massive horde of zombies launched a swift and fierce attack on the base. Blair, look, they're attacking like mad. If they don't stop soon, the main gate won't hold. Jackson came over with explosives. I'll lead them away. There's an abandoned bridge to the west. If we can draw them onto the bridge and detonate the explosives, we can wipe them out all at once. I grabbed his arm. Just you? He looked back, and a group of volunteers ready to risk their lives. I followed his gaze. Tyler waved at me, and I saw Arya sitting in the passenger seat. She smiled at me. I think I roughly understood where this bizarre zombie horde came from. System, good job. To correct one mistake you need so many people to be buried with it. Maybe you've scripted some disgusting plot for me in this apocalypse. But I'm inherently rebellious and never like being arranged by others. I looked at Jackson, and in his astonished gaze, I directly jumped onto his armored vehicle. Let's go together. I took out the long-unused katana, its gleaming blade reflecting my face. Familiar, yet somewhat strange. System, how about we make a bet? After a long static noise, the system finally responded. Bet on what? Bet on whether we can make it back alive. I remember the sunset that day was beautiful. Jackson drove the armored vehicle out of another exit of the base, quickly followed by several other vehicles. The spinning wheels kicked up layers of dust. We raced towards the west, facing the sunset. The zombies gathered at the base gate stopped their movement, listening to the intermittent horn sounds, and involuntarily turned their heads. They saw us. They rushed towards us. We drove, leading the zombie horde in a wild chase. Jackson was so excited he almost shouted. I turned to look at him. So excited, Jackson nodded. Yes, excited because we might not come back this time. Me, I glanced in the rearview mirror, Tyler carrying Arya closely behind. Leo, with the people of the base, stood on the high wall continuously waving at me. That moment, I couldn't quite explain my feelings, exhilarating, yet somewhat reassuring, despite being followed by a horde of man-eating zombies, despite still being on the road. But I believe, dawn is finally breaking in the apocalypse. Epilogue. The bet I made with the system, in the end, I won. I wanted to show off in front of the system, but I realized that the very palpable presence in my mind had vanished. The system arrived quietly and left just as silently. This discovery left me feeling exhilarated yet somewhat bewildered. With the system gone, my personal storage space also disappeared. Fortunately, my physical strength has not faded. On day 410 of the apocalypse, I gained true freedom. In a daze, I heard someone calling me, Blair. Come over here, what's up? Just listen. After more than a year, we heard a broadcast again. The voice of the elegant and official female announcer sounded like music from heaven. Dear survivors, hello. The country is currently experiencing an unprecedented catastrophe. Virus experts have developed an antibody against these undying monsters, and the experiments have been hugely successful. Production of the antibodies has started. Please ensure your own safety and patiently await national rescue. Finally, thank you all once again for your perseverance.